Hello everyone, this is Shawn Kenney playing some more Kerbal Space Program. Going through basically stock Kerbal Space Program with the science update, going through career mode. So we've had a successful launch from orbit around Duna anyways. I'm basically using a similar design for my Mariner project, and this project I'm going to try and get to Eve. It's pretty much about the same distance. I'm more or less using pretty much the same rocket setup. All I've done is I've ended up adding a science bay to the drone, or the landing pod that I'm going to land, hopefully on Eve, if not maybe the moon Gilly. I don't quite know what I'm going to hit yet, but I've sort of put together some video here of my journey. Once again, using these solid rocket boosters. I was trying to use some new rockets that I uncovered in the last episode with our Mariner project, but I haven't unlocked really the big rocket engine yet, and the one that I unlocked was a slightly smaller one, and no matter what kind of setup I was having, it just wasn't working or it would become too unstable. So I basically went back to the old tried and tested design with all those rockets at the bottom. So here I am, we're just getting into orbit. I think I did pretty good with this orbit because I think I got a little bit more fuel. I did change that tank. Before I had that in the two smaller tanks. Unlocking the larger tank, that kind of maybe saved a little bit of weight, made things a little more efficient. So I got a fairly good apoapsis. At this point, though, I'm going to... I was getting pretty far from the periapsis, so I was going to let us go around an orbit and maybe save a little bit of fuel. Since I don't have any life support mods or anything on this, I can basically spend as much time in space as I need, and I really will need it in getting to Eve, because it turned out to be a little bit trickier than I expected. But I'm realizing here now that that extra orbit has kind of put the MUN in the way, and get an intercept. I'm kind of thinking maybe I'll be able to do a slingshot off the MUN, maybe to get out to solar orbit. I'm kind of getting worried. I don't know whether I'm burning more fuel or less fuel at this point. But at this point I have like a really good... Look, this looks like a free return trajectory from the MUN. So if I was going to the MUN, this was like just awesome. But it just kept going a little bit further, and that seemed to work out pretty good for me. It looks like we're going to be doing... that's going to be kicking me out, and that's... yeah, okay. I don't know if it's projecting out quite that far, but looks like we're going to have a really near miss, if not a hit, on the MUN. Actually, it looks like... oh man, you know what? If I was going to the MUN, I don't know if I could set up an orbit quite that nice if I tried. But since we're not going to the MUN, of course I can do it. And I'm going to take the opportunity to do a little bit of science when I do the flyby here. And so as you can see, I've added a science container. I've tried to beef up the design of the probe a little bit. I thought I'd hop out, get an EVA sample. Once again, I kind of have a really compact design, so as soon as I hop out of there with a Kerbal, he kind of gets flung. But we get, hey, a little bit of extra moon data. Once again, I'm not mining any of the areas, so what I'm not doing is I'm not going to an area and just doing science, broadcasting it over and over and over again until I basically exhaust the amount of science that I can get from the area. I'm trying to keep it to one sample. Either if I'm going to do a sample, like one sample from an area, then transmit it, or if I'm bringing back a sample, then that's the sample. I'm going to try and get as far as I can get out, get the sample, and come back. and that's sort of my philosophy in doing the science. You know what? It's been working pretty good. I've been unlocking several tech trees per science mission. You know, these last couple missions going to the Duna got me like 700. So, you know, I'm getting a fair amount. I'm able to unlock a few trees, but it's not unlocking everything. And, yeah, so I had to do actually about 2 years in orbit to get an intercept. So this is a little bit of 4 times as I'm burning and burning. And I think that's actually, yeah, I'm just actually aligning, because Eve is on a bit of a tilt, so I was trying to match that tilt first. And then, so that was about 2 years in orbit. And then about another year and a half here before I finally get it lined up for an intercept. Probably didn't have to spend quite that much time. You know, I mean, if I was really sort of thinking it through, maybe I'd check it out online, do some research, but I do kind of like sort of, you know, hey, I'm going to fire the rocket, I know how to get into orbit, okay, I know how to get out into solar orbit, okay, let's try and get in orbit with another planet. It's kind of the way I approach it. I'm really brute forcing it, I'm sure, and not sort of doing all the orbital calculations. So yeah, I just burn until I got an intercept. You know, we're only 255 days in. Like I said, I'm thinking this is going to get me a fairly close orbit. I'm hoping. I'm starting to get a feel for it. Like the first bit of an orbit, it seems to expand out and get you further. I know there's people that can explain all the good scientific terms about it. But then if you keep accelerating just a little bit, it'll sort of flip around, and then your orbit will become smaller, and that, I think, gives you a tighter orbit like this. So this is going to be a lot easier to do a braking maneuver. It's going to be a lot less costly than, say, oftentimes when I just sort of hit the initial intercept and then come in at a really high velocity angle into the system. So as you can see, it's only about 500 meters per second that I have to do to close the loop on this orbit. And then we'll be in proper orbit. We can start doing some science. I'm down to those last 2 tanks on the side, and then of course that's all fuel lined into the center tank, so I'll have that for basically what I'm thinking is my return, which should be enough for this small craft. And just closing the loop on that. Yeah, I was really actually impressed. I got really lucky with a couple of these orbits in a row. Being so close is going to make it really easy to get the probe down. So I just extended out. I did a little bit of science when I was close in, and what I'm going to do is separate the probe now. And there we go. Let's decouple that. And I better get the... I didn't have those solar panels deployed. They're kind of clipping into that the separation ring. I really need the blue ones that'll... It doesn't affect them. They don't. This collision detection doesn't seem to block it or interfere or cause it to be, you know, that when they move they don't break or anything. I just don't like it. Bit of a pet peeve. You know, the solar panel should be free and clear of the spacecraft, in my opinion. But what I'm going to try and do is we're going to do a little bit of aerobraking, and right at the apoapsis, it's going to cost me like no fuel at all to lower that periapsis a bit and maybe dip it into Eve's atmosphere. Now, Eve's got higher gravity than Kerbin and like a thicker atmosphere. So the general rule of thumb is, from what I heard, is if you want to land on Eve and get back, it takes as much fuel to get into orbit around Eve from the surface as it does to get to orbit from Kerbin. So yeah, I've never actually developed... I've landed probes in previous playthroughs or rovers on Eve, but I've never been able to create a craft that's been able to escape Eve. Maybe that's something I might turn myself to, but from what I've seen, the rockets required probably would break my computer. It's worth a try. We'll see what, how the game develops. Maybe some parts will come available that will make it a little bit easier. Now, I'm just going to leave the mothercraft sort of out in orbit, and while I deal with the probe landing. And yeah, I'm not quite sure, so we got a nice big apoapsis. Accelerate time through there, but I realize that it's not really, I don't think I'm going far deep enough. So I'm on the next orbit, I'm going to switch around. Actually, I'm going to do the burn to escape for my mothercraft here. We've taken our science readings from a high orbit around Eve. That's going to be sufficient for my return. You know, don't want to risk it. I have a fair amount of fuel left. I think, you know, I'm pretty confident I can do it. But we've taken our scientific readings. We've delivered the probe. I'm gonna, just have a couple extra goo canisters, so might as well take a couple extra samples. There we go. We'll keep that and return that to Kerbin. Maybe some fine particulates of Eve's atmosphere might be stuck in the gel, and maybe we'll be able to get some readings off that. I really want to get those blue Sepratron ones that separate on both sides, so I don't have that decoupler stuck. Well, looks like we have a nice escape orbit for our mothercraft, and now I'm going to switch back to the probe, which I'm going to want to cut the periapsis down just a little bit. Now, it shows that my mothercraft is sort of still in orbit around Eve, but when I return, it is still on an escape velocity. So I think it's something to do with, while it's still in the system, it's calculating an orbit that, it's not calculating a full orbit or something, and it's just sort of placeholdering it, I guess. So, just lining up. I want to bring that periapsis down a little bit deeper into the atmosphere, a little bit more aggressive, but I don't want to burn. Well, not really going to burn up, of course. Don't have deadly reentry, but I am going to close up the solar panels for the next pass-through, because I think we may be going through enough atmosphere that we're going to lose it. I have a ton of fuel. What I want to do is try and save as much fuel as possible and use it to brake myself for when my parachute's deploy, to try and avoid tearing my ship in twain. Yeah, so I'm gonna try lining us up. I've been thinking about checking out a few mods like Kethane again. Now that they've added it into the science tech tree, the remote tech looks really interesting, along with the Kethane. The deadly reentry, I'm a little leery. It might make things a little tricky the way I generally do it. As you can see, we're definitely bleeding off a lot of speed here. Yeah, see, I mean, when I think about like this kind of mission, I just don't know how I could. I would think I'm coming in. Maybe I just have to take multiple passes, dipping down to 40 kilometers in Eve's atmosphere. We're definitely going through some thick atmosphere. There we go. So deadly reentry is something I'm considering. What I want to do, I want to get the procedural fairings as well, just because fairings are cool, and having them split off as your ship goes out into space. It just, not that I'm that the aerodynamics are really required as far as the stock Kerbal Space Program goes, but you know, I'm starting to get up there in the science career mode. I don't know how many more missions, you know, I'm figuring a few more missions and we might be close to maxing it out. At that point, that's when I feel like, okay, let's, you know, throw in Kethane, throw in the remote tech, perhaps life support. I don't know, I'm going to have to play around with a few mods, see what works well on my computer and with the recording. You know, maybe explore some mods, because now I've gotten Dune under my belt. I'm going to, you know, looks like we got Eve here, and I just accelerated a bit. Oh, there we go, touchdown. I did cut down a lot of the the drop, because actually it was quite boring. The parachutes deploy fairly high up. As you can see, I burned through a bunch of my fuel to slow us down, but it almost wasn't necessary because Eve's atmosphere is super thick. Now, it looks like we splashed down, and thankfully, we are floating in whatever the substance that is supposed to be the oceans of Eve. We're not quite sure. But strangely enough, we're getting direct sunlight through Eve. So that was kind of unexpected. Some of the the seismic, for some reason you can't use the seismic accelerator when you're floating in an ocean. Go figure. Maybe, I guess it has to be steady, which would make sense. But I was able to get some readings, like barometric readings. That's great. We're able to transmit that. Temperature readings. We're able to get scientific readings. Now, I wanted to get all that before time accelerating. I wasn't sure if floating in the ocean was going to cause any damage, but looks like it's probably pretty thick, whatever is liquid in the atmosphere of Eve. I'm not quite sure, but well, I should have toggled the display. I'll have to double check on what the barometric pressure on Eve is. We sent the data up, but I didn't check it out in this video. Maybe we can figure out what would be liquid on Eve, or I'm sure someone knows, and they'll tell me in comments. But we'll get a few more readings. Like I said, I don't want to maximize science in this playthrough. I'm trying to, I don't know, you get a couple experiments that before, the life of a scientific object. Although the rovers on Mars, they're still going, aren't they? So hey, I guess maybe there is something to be said. But I'm trying to go the conservative playthrough, I guess, is what I'm doing. So let's have a look. Yeah, it's really hard to land on Eve on some of the nice land sometimes. But we have a probe there now. It seems to be stable, floating as it is. And it's time to get our craft home, which ends up taking quite a bit time as I'm fiddling. I think it was another 1.5 year orbit. What are we up to? 418 days. Jeb's been, he's really getting tired of that cockpit at this point. It's second home to him now. Primary home, his only home, living in like a shoebox. But here we are, getting up to... part of the difficulty in getting a nice alignment is whether you want to waste fuel in tilting your orbit to try and match your targets. Because that, with the slight tilts, that ends up... You basically end up losing out in good sections of each path when you really can't align yourself. I suppose if you're good, then you probably are able to compensate part way or do some fancy maneuvers that I don't know. I'm starting to learn. Yeah, looks like I got 3 good orbits, and it seems like you get that initial connect, and then if you just sort of give it this little smallest amount of thrust, the orbit that you end up getting, it will get sort of large and then tighten down, and then you become a smaller one. And that smaller one seems to indicate that you're getting a lower periapsis, because it's going to be really hard to keep your mouse cursor on, especially going interplanetary. Putting your mouse cursor on the target periapsis with the movement system, and being able to see really, what your periapsis is, and then trying to figure out in the math, like how many numbers, like how close do I really need to be, and just from this run through, it's sort of really focused in my mind. Now here I'm not being the most fuel efficient. I'm kind of dropping my apoapsis, but at this point, I realize that I have pretty much almost all my fuel left in that last stage, and who knows, maybe I could have taken a shot at Gilly. That's quite possible. But, maybe a mission for another day, of course. I still really have to get to Duna. I've, kind of cheated and only went to the moon. But, from what I'm learning from doing all these orbits lately, I'm kind of hopeful that, my next mission to Duna, what I want to do is maybe put a rover there. Maybe an actual manned mission to one of these planets, and I always like Duna as one of my first targets. Or we can try Dres, perhaps. Or the infamous Moho. I'm going to have to unlock a few more parts. Maybe once we get the nuclear engines, we'll be able to start experimenting around a little bit more. Now, just sort of accelerate, time accelerating. It's doing a little bit of aero braking to try and, I basically didn't want to land with a whole lot of fuel. I was kind of worried that the extra weight might cause issues in landing and make things a little bit more explodey than they would necessarily have to be. Now, I do have a separate a stage booster for the bottom fuel tank, so I could actually ditch it. I decided to keep it on because it also had my landing legs, and I was a little worried that landing, even with a parachute on the science module might be a little bit too delicate for that. So that's why, even though I have a stage decoupler, it's kind of maybe a bit of a wasted weight. I did decide to keep the bottom stage on for this final landing, just to perhaps, be a little bit of extra cushion, a little bit more reinforcement. Once again, you're going to use some asbestos parachutes, which I'm going to have to get out of the habit of using if I want to look at the deadly reentry, because I'd probably be losing a fair amount. I'd probably be losing all those science pods, and actually, I probably would have to ditch that lower module, and I'd have to have a heat shield on it. So definitely something I'm considering. I want to try and add maybe some mods that add some functionality that we might expect when Kerbal Space Program goes, final version 1. It might happen one day. They're definitely getting closer. So as you can see, I still have a little bit of fuel. I used a little bit of fuel to try and, once again, slow myself down when at the point the parachute's deployed, and at the final landing. And it was successful. So we got some great science back from the orbit of Eve, at least, while the probes already broadcast back a lot of its data. I can take a few samples here from some of the instruments that I wasn't able to get to use in orbit. Not huge amounts of scientific data, but, while we're out here, we might as well do it. And we can also do a ground sample, plant a flag, as per usual. A nice successful launch. Some actual really good. I'm really happy with the 3 orbital injections I managed to pull off. I think I'm starting to learn Kerbal. Anyways, I'm gonna hop down. Jeb, I think Jeb, you've done some spectacular work, but I think I'm gonna have to maybe start using some other Kerbals for future missions, just to give them some experience. You've been relegating them with all kinds of great stories about your adventures and all the things you've seen. So let's plant your flag. And well done, Jeb. I'm going to have to count up your roster of how many games, how many missions you've got us through, but a nice successful Eve return. So we got our flag planted, we've got a ground sample, we've taken EVA report, we can head back up to the module. Apparently my rendering has just gone really bad for some reason. Apparently the recording, it may have been starting to run out of space. So I do apologize for the slight frames per second issue here. What do we got? We got a whole bunch of science. We got 432 science earned on this mission. I don't know if it's counting the science from the probe, though. Yeah, I'm getting all the high over Eve stuff. Okay, so that's not too bad. And then we got a little bit, probably got more science from the probe. I think that counts as differently. Let's check out the science tree. What am I going to get here? Oh, good. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Shopping for science. Okay, I want to get rover parts. Those wheels, landing. I don't really need those, but that might unlock something else. The next level is science. Don't think I'm going to get that quite yet. Those small thrusters. I don't know what I need to unlock to get that. Maybe the nuclear? I don't want to go nuclear quite yet, because then it kind of becomes the de facto final engine that you're ever going to use. But, I mean, the other engines have their purpose. But let's get the nuclear. It didn't unlock that. Okay, it must be something further along that I haven't explored, because I'm expecting that last one up in the top is going to give me my final Rocco Max engine. Let's get some probe stuff. I think probes are going to be really useful. Maybe we can get one on the moon, and then they can go around to all the different biomes. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I think we'll do a rover into the moon next time. I'm Shawn Kenney playing Kerbal Space Program. Thanks for watching. So long for now.